Hi, I'm Dr. Dave Hayes, and for my short rant on September 17, 2022, I want to talk about fighting the Russian occupation in Ukraine, or the battle for hearts and minds that's going on as part of that. So we've got a lot of news coming out about the mass graves in Izyum, and we're finding this evidence of widespread Russian atrocities. ISW, the Institute for Study of War, has said that, they've assessed, and they said the atrocities, the crimes we saw around Bucha, when the Russians pulled out from north of Kyiv, were widespread. They said, look, this is about the poor discipline, lack of professionalism in the Russian army, and their tendency to be brutal towards populations, right? This is an institutionalized, endemic, and widespread problem. And they're arguing that, yeah, here we are. We're seeing, as you liberate other areas, you're going to find this. So these mass graves, as they find more people, they identify them as civilians and see evidence of torture, is an important part of the narrative of this war. And not to in any way not step aside or to ignore the inherent tragedy of these crimes and that sort of thing. We nevertheless have to look at the political effect. What is this doing for the support for the war, for attitudes amongst Ukraine? I think Ukrainians are pretty much against the fight, but the Europeans, because very often you hear the concern, will the Allies continue to support Ukraine? In Europe, I think these atrocities are important, or potentially have an impact, in that if Europeans see Ukraine as them, right? See this as, this could be us. And certainly Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, Poland, these are folks who are going to be very, thinking about this. They've been occupied by, they've been part of the Soviet Union or occupied by Soviet forces, and they are on the front lines. And so, they're likely to say, hey, that could be us. And other Europeans, to maybe a lesser extent, going to have that same feeling. They're also going to be just outraged on this. And this is going to be important because they're facing a winter where it's going to get cold and energy prices are going to go up. So, as this is happening, I think, in this context of the cost to the average European of this war is going to become much more tangible and immediate as the winter goes on, as the cold weather sets in, energy prices go up. Even though oil has been coming down, the natural gas question is going to be there. So how this plays out, I think, is very important with those folks. Also, another wrinkle to this, the Ukrainians are warning that the Russians are going to conduct false flag attacks on ethnic Russian civilians in Ukraine as part of their justification of the war and their attempt to frame the Ukrainians as the evil aggressors and talk about Ukrainian atrocities. Now, false flag attacks are problematic, right? They're hard to prove, and we haven't had the definitive proof that these things have occurred. There's so many reports of them, mainly from the Ukrainians. It's hard, but the nature of a false flag attack is that it's a conspiracy theory. It is, they are trying to hide the truth, and the argument is that, of course the Ukrainians would say that they want you to believe that we're doing this, but they are actually doing it. So this is something we're going to watch. I think it does go to kind of the Russian approach to occupation. It is about terror. It is about framing people as aggressors. And so we are going to justify our occupation by the evilness of the opponent, which is, arguably how we're justifying support for Ukraine. Although at another level, we do say Ukraine's a democracy and that sort of thing. But the alternative, the point here is that the Russians are not conducting an occupation that's trying to gain legitimacy. They don't have they're not building the legitimacy of these republics. They aren't offering we're going to have a referendum, but they're not in there working on trying to build a sense of, you want to be part of Russia. Look at us, we're doing a better job of this. That doesn't seem to be in their toolbox. So I think that's going to run counter to their interests and impair their ability to quote unquote win hearts and minds. Then there's the Ukrainian side, right? And so again, my little biased thing here, I'm going to talk about partisan activity that the Ukrainians are doing. I'm going to frame it that way. The Russians would like you to understand that, to see it as terrorist attacks, that the Ukrainians are conducting terrorist attacks, they're killing their own people, and et cetera, et cetera. And this is something that has somewhat worried me, is that, when you fight a war like this and when you're occupied, you tend to do nasty things, right? When you're in an occupied area, the people that are fighting there are inherently outgunned, and so they're going to do things. They're going to attack collaborators because they're going to try to convince the population not to do it, right? And there have been reports of bombs being planted in houses of people who were collaborating with the occupation authorities, and so Ukrainians will attack Ukrainians. And that is the age-old story of a partisan fight. But it does lend itself to, hey, this is illegal. You're killing civilians, right? This is, it's not in a 21st century legal moral system. It's not cool, right? And it threatens to be a problem. So in the midst of all this, though, today we have a different thing happening. We have the Ukrainians attacking the Russian occupation authority in Kherson. They fired several HIMARS missiles into a building that the Russians are using while they were having a meeting of their leadership, right? So this is this is the kind of thing you would expect to see, that their intelligence tells them that a lot of people are going to be in this building, and they bomb it. Normally, though, the bombing would have to be done through covert, partisan, irregular warfare means. And one might call them terrorist attack means, right? Certainly, the planning of a bomb, like take the King David Hotel in Jerusalem. That was the British headquarters, right? One wing of the King David Hotel housed the British Army headquarters, right? So that's very similar, the occupation headquarters. The Israelis, as they weren't Israelis yet, the Jewish population in Palestine was trying to get the British out. They wanted to declare a state, etc., which they did. And a more radical faction, the Irgun, bombed the King David Hotel. And this gets lumped in as a terrorist attack. This is part in the discussions of terrorism. It's often brought up as an example of it. And that's a problem. That's the kind of thing the Ukrainians want to avoid. So now they have used HIMARS rockets. And, we've given them these HIMARS. This is artillery. It's a conventional artillery thing. It is also has the benefit of being precision guided, right? So it can actually hit the building they're aiming at and not hit civilians. And it has a range of 70 kilometers, right? About 50 miles. So they are able to reach a lot, especially as they move forward, they're able to reach a large part of these areas and attack deep. What is in my head as I watch this is the quote by Frederick the Great. He said that artillery lends dignity to what would otherwise be a vulgar brawl. And this is often, it's seen as kind of tongue-in-cheek. In the Army, there's like a cartoon of this. But we often also said that's also bullducky because, again, war is a serious business. It's about fighting. We don't like euphemisms. We don't want to romanticize it. And so there's a lot of pushback against this. But at a certain level, the optics of an artillery attack are much better, right? And the Ukrainians have been able to use the HIMARS in conjunction with their intelligence to do something that probably won't be seen in the same way the King David Hotel attack was seen, right? And I don't understand why it matters how you attack a target if you're going to put, whether the explosives come through the roof in a rocket or whether they're snuck in a basket, or a suicide bomber rushes at the building or drives a truck into it. Why does that matter? I never understand that, but it probably does, right? If we talk about optics and in the battle for hearts and minds, it probably does. And certainly the ability to do this kind of thing on demand without exposing your partisan intelligence network to being raveled up, that's certainly a better way of going about this. So I know that at least at the material level, this is a really great way to attack targets. And they're having this effect. Hey, if you're working for the Russian Occupation Authority, you got to be wondering, right, what's coming through the roof next. Also, the Ukrainians have warned the civilians, stay away from occupation headquarters and all their facilities. We are now attacking them. So that's going to make the occupation guys, their job even more difficult. And so I think this is a very 21st century approach to this problem that the Ukrainians are at least once they've used it, we'll see if it's a pattern. And it is very much part of this ongoing battle for hearts and minds. And so we're going to want to watch how that develops.
Thank you for watching my short rant. I hope it was short and not too much of a rant. I'm Dr. Dave Hayes, and though I teach at Troy University, this video is my own work. Troy University has neither approved nor reviewed the content. So there. And if you want to learn more about Troy anyway, figure out who would hire a guy like this, you can always go to www.troy.edu. I also am going to have a little card popping up here that you can go see my bio and some information about where I teach, which will descend to shameless self-promotion, but I want more students, what can I say? And finally, the music you've been listening to is Tonight at 8 by Shane Ivers. So thank you for listening, and I hope you'll come back and enjoy another short rant.